Okay, so as many of you know, the past couple of weeks have been quite turbulent in the Canada and United States relationships. We have, in the American side, Donald Trump, who has been constantly threatening to make Canada a 51st state, and he has been threatening to do it by economic force. And then, of course, in Canada, Justin Trudeau and the premiers countering back and saying, well, what are you talking about? Canada is never going to become a 51st state, and we're not going to allow it. And then we have Trump again coming back and saying to us, well, no, it's not about becoming the 51st state. No, it's about the fentanyl. No, it's about not the fentanyl, it's about the illegal migrants. And the story keeps on changing from the Americans and what they want. More specifically, it keeps on, swinging back and forth between fentanyl to migrants to the surplus or some sort of trade deficit that Canada holds with the United States. And it has left the current relationship with the United States and Canada to be quite degraded and at a low point. And you have to remember, Canada is not some narco nation, and we we barely we barely have any fentanyl going over the border if we compare it to a state like Mexico, where maybe the fentanyl claim is much more reasonable. In Mexico, they have 21,000 pounds or something like that of fentanyl going from Mexico to the United States that was intercepted by the border agents there. And in Canada, well, we only had 43 pounds intercepted. So to use the excuse that, well, we're going to tariff you because you guys are uh, fentanyl across the border is utterly fanciful. But so the weeks passed on and the threats kept coming. And today marks the day of February the 3rd, where Trump eventually said he was going to impose tariffs of 25% across the board on Canada. And Mexico at 12:01 a.m. on the 4th of February, Tuesday morning, basically. So many people question what is the point of doing this to your two biggest trading partners? The costs are inevitably going to fall back onto the American consumers, and this is an utterly stupid move. And then there's these, Trump supporters on the Canadian side saying, oh, well, he's just saying, do fix the border and then, make sure there's no drug supply going over and make those concessions that, we're dealing with that issue. And he'll stop. And that is what Canada did. We already had a $1.3 billion plan from about 1 month ago saying that we're going to go ahead and deal with the illegal migrant crossings and the fentanyl problem, though minuscule, we have a plan to deal with it. And that should have sufficed as reasonable and a good enough concession for the United States and Trump. But no, he wanted to continue forward till the very last day and minute before he conceded. Because this tariff was never about drugs or the border. This was about imposing the American power onto its neighbors and to try to force us to concede positions, which it did to an extent, but it could have been very, very avoidable, all the issues that came afterwards and came to fruition now. And the reality is, Trump wanted Canada as well as Mexico, but of course, we'll focus on Canada. He wanted Canada to bend over and bend on a knee for the United States. He wanted us to come begging to him, saying that we want to deal, oh, we want to negotiate. Oh my God, we're so scared of your tariffs. Don't tariff us, please. We're begging for a deal. And in reality, that didn't happen. Canada went ahead with a strong, firm response that if you impose tariffs on us, we will counter you. We will counter the United States, and we will counter any threat of tariffs if they are imposed. And we laid out a plan. Props to Justin Trudeau for doing that, and the premiers, except Alberta. Alberta is naive. Alberta is just a, what you can call, very, very Americanized, American focused state. So they should have seen that from the very beginning, this was a huge and whole kind of bluff coming from the United States and Trump. He was using this tariff threat as a sort of hammer to impose the American power and make a show of force on its allies. And he hoped that he could have made more concessions come out of Canada because, in the grand scheme of things, when the push came to shove, the tariffs were never going to take place because Trump knows, as well as the rest of the, business class in America, that these tariffs are not what is good for America. They are going to be detrimental. And Trump, being a businessman, is well aware of that. You look at the art of the deal and all of his past, business dealings and, rhetorics and all of those, shock and awe moves he does. This was also one of them. And I applaud the leadership in Canada to those leaders who stood up, who took force to the threat that the Americans and Trump posed to us. If we didn't, and we didn't defend our sovereignty, and we didn't show that we would fight back, essentially we would have looked weak, and it would have made us put us in a vulnerable position, as it would have shown to the Americans and Trump that we were ready to, give them a large amount of concessions, as we were not ready to take any charge against them. But we showed to the Americans that no, we are ready, we are willing, and we are ready to fight. And if we had taken the approach of like Danielle Smith of Alberta, where we just say diplomacy, well, that just makes us look like a little brother to the United States. And this whole ordeal, which people will say is not over yet, because there's 30 days till the next tariff threat, because it's only been paused for a month. But this whole ordeal could have been, this whole ordeal taught us a very important thing, that we are too dependent on the United States for our trade. And Trump is kind of that outlier in the statistic where you have a leader who is volatile, who is irrational and ambiguous in what he wants, but is ready to, throw curveballs every day at you. And we Canadians took it for granted, the security of our relationship with the United States, because such that a leader like Trump comes in and starts to, exploit our weakness and our dependency on the United States, we were bound to fail if he had fallen, if these tariffs kept going on for, maybe years, and it had put us in a very weak position. That's why Trump did what he did. And that is the fault of Canadians and the governments in Canada for not realizing the threat that, having a central trading partner like the United States and wholly depending on them. This should be a wake-up call for Canada now, that we should move more so away from the United States and go into the world. We should strengthen our military to protect our sovereignty. We should strengthen trading relationships with Europe, the emerging markets across the world, and most importantly, we should tear down the provincial barriers of trade, which have been up and detrimental to the Canadian economy. We trade more with the USA as a province to province basis than we do with provinces in between provinces. And that's not reasonable. That is totally, totally unwise to do. And we need to break down the barriers that we've kept up for the past decades and decades and decades because we've just took the easy route and just went with the free trade with America. a lot of things to be learned from this whole issue, this whole fiasco. And I hope that the leaders of the Canadian governments across the provinces to the federal government take this as a stark wake up call to really bring about a change in the way we do things in this country. To take out that kind of like slow and lazy approach to governing and the economy, and invigorate a sort of change to make us independent and make us strong in our sovereignty by making sure we have a strong economy that is diversified and a strong military. We need to trade oil between provinces, not with the USA. We need to make sure Canadians are trading with each other first, and that our own provinces here are strengthening each other. That's one of the most important things we can do to establish our sovereignty and make sure that when a threat from Trump or any American leader comes in the future, we are able to not take too much of a, scare from it. And we are able to be strong on our own. This is very important. This is a very important wake-up call. It was needed, actually. And though it has been scary for a lot of people's jobs are dependent on the trade with the United States and the free trade. It is a wake-up call to get active and start to think differently and do things differently than we have in the past decades and decades of the free trade agreements we've had with the United States than we have had. The future is volatile, and we need to embrace the idea that Canada and the USA and our relationship is not as stable as we thought it was. That's just what I think from my, analysis of the situation. I think it is very important we take the lessons we learned from this situation and take action to strengthen our economy by diversifying and strengthening our military and making sure that's a big focus that we have. And make sure that Canada is not just a little brother to the United States. We become our own powerful nation. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.